It was a quiet Thursday morning in Washington, D.C. The kind of morning that carried no headlines, no camera flashes, and no need for speeches. Just gray skies, the sound of tires on wet asphalt, and the hush of routine. In a small neighborhood grocery store on the corner of Q Street, fluorescent lights hummed softly above rows of cereal boxes, stacked produce, and the faint smell of warm bread from the bakery aisle. The world was going about its business, and then he walked in, not with an entourage, not with the urgency of a motorcade, but like any man running a small errand between other, more important things. Barack Obama. Tall, familiar, but dressed in a nondescript jacket and jeans that somehow made him blend in more than stand out. He held a short list in one hand, slightly folded, with blue ink notes scribbled in the margin. One could just barely make out the words, milk, fruit, and something that looked like napkins. He moved slowly through the store. Not out of uncertainty, but with the deliberateness of someone who had learned to read people, and preferred to walk through the world, not above it. Customers glanced at him but didn't quite register. A few narrowed their eyes, then returned to their carts. Recognition crept in only after he had passed them by. When he reached the dairy section, he stopped. It was a simple row of shelves behind glass doors, bottles lined up with colored caps and labels. Skim, whole, almond, oat, lactose-free, a dozen types for a single question. He stood there, staring that a teenage boy, no older than 15, walked up beside him to grab a chocolate milk. He froze for half a second when he saw the profile, the calm eyes, the slow nod of acknowledgement. Excuse me, sir, the boy said, reaching past to grab a carton. Obama stepped aside politely, still focused on the options in front of him. He then did something that caught the attention of the cashier watching from the front. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through a few messages, then paused and scratched his head. He seemed genuinely unsure which milk he was supposed to bring home. Behind him, a middle-aged woman in a navy blue coat leaned over her cart and said, 2% is usually a safe bet. Obama turned and smiled. That's what I thought. But you never want to gamble on dairy when it's for your wife. There was a small, polite laugh. She nodded. Wise man. He took the 2% carton, gave a grateful nod, and turned down the aisle. Nothing about the moment was presidential. No speeches, no slogans. And yet, something lingered in the air, the rarest kind of power, the ability to simply be among people and make them feel seen, even if for just a second. What no one noticed then, not even him, was the small boy near the magazine rack, watching silently, clutching a notebook he didn't yet have the courage to open. But that would come later. He didn't approach. Not then. The boy stood near the magazine rack, close enough to see everything, far enough to stay invisible. His name was Leo, 12 years old, wearing a school hoodie 2 sizes too big and holding a half-filled basket with a loaf of bread, a can of soup, and a notebook clutched like something sacred. It wasn't new, the corners were bent, the spine cracked. Inside, pages were covered with sketches, people on the bus, shadows under trees, outlines of faces from memory. But the last 5 pages were blank. Reserved. He had hoped for something, someone, worth drawing, and then Barack Obama had walked into the store. Leo hadn't noticed right away. Not until the man stopped in front of the milk. Something about his posture, the way he squinted at the labels, then looked at his phone, it was so ordinary it was almost surreal. Leo recognized him in stages, the voice, the profile, the calm. By the time it clicked, Obama had already turned the corner. Leo's fingers tightened around the notebook. From behind the register, Denise, the cashier, watched it all unfold with a kind of knowing stillness. She'd seen presidents on TV, sure, but this was different. Here was a man who had once sat in the Oval Office, now quietly debating between oat milk and 2%. She thought about calling her daughter, then decided against it. Moments like these weren't meant for cameras. Meanwhile, Leo followed, not close, just a few aisles back. Obama moved without a rush. He picked up a bag of apples, examined each one briefly, and placed them gently in a paper bag. He paused by the pasta shelf, smiled faintly at the price sticker like it triggered a memory. then selected a box of penne. Leo stepped forward, heart hammering. When Obama turned into the spice aisle, Leo reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a pencil. He flipped to a fresh page and began sketching with careful, fast strokes, outlines first, then the slope of the shoulders, the slight tilt of the head, the quiet thoughtfulness in his eyes. He didn't think about being seen. He just needed to capture it before the moment slipped away. Then something unexpected happened. Obama stopped as he turned halfway around and looked down the aisle toward the boy, his expression unreadable for a moment. Leo froze, pencil in hand. For a second, the silence felt like thunder. "You drawing me?" Obama asked gently. Leo's mouth went dry. His hands trembled. Kind of," he mumbled. Obama didn't move closer. He simply nodded. "I used to do that too. Not drawing. But watching. Paying attention. Sometimes that's how you learn the most." Leo blinked. "Can I see?" Obama asked, motioning gently toward the notebook. The boy hesitated, then held it out with both hands, like offering something precious. Obama stepped forward, took it carefully, and flipped through the pages. He studied them, not skimming, but truly looking. "These are good," he said finally, and Leo thought his knees might give out. "You see people," Obama added, handing the notebook back. "That's rare." Before Leo could respond, Denise's voice called out from the front, "Sir, would you like paper or plastic?" Obama smiled. "Paper, thank you." He gave Leo a parting nod, one of those quiet gestures that said more than words. Then he walked toward the checkout, groceries in hand, footsteps soft and steady. Leo stood in the spice aisle for a full minute after he'd gone, pencil still in hand, sketchbook pressed to his chest. That he had no photo. No autograph, but he had the drawing, and for the first time in his life, he felt like an artist. Denise tore the receipt from the register with a practiced flick of her wrist and handed it across the counter. "You want a bag?" she asked, even though she already knew the answer. "Paper, please," Obama replied, still warm in his tone, still folding himself neatly into the quiet rhythm of the moment. He tucked his phone into his coat pocket, slid the folded list beside the apples, and placed the 2% milk into the bag with unusual care, like it might bruise if handled wrong. Denise had worked that register for 17 years, and she had never fumbled change, never let her drawer run over, never lost composure. But something about this morning, it wasn't nerves, exactly. It was weight. She handed him his bag with both hands, then, impulsively, said, "You don't have to talk like you're still in office, you know." Obama paused, brow lifted, then gave her a knowing smile. "Bad habit," he said. 8 years of manners take longer to shake than you'd think." She smiled back, despite herself. Meanwhile, Leo was still standing in the spice aisle, pretending to study a jar of cumin. He wasn't hiding anymore, just thinking. In his hands, the notebook was open to the sketch. It wasn't perfect. The jawline needed work, and the shading on the collarbone was off. But it had caught something essential. A quiet alertness. A kind of attention people usually save for big moments, but here, it lived inside something small. Leo flipped the page and began drawing again. This time, he wasn't copying. He was remembering. Not just Obama's face, but the shape of the moment. The smell of cardamom nearby. The glint of morning light on the dairy shelf. The woman in the coat who'd suggested 2%. He drew them all. The world was fuller than he'd realized, and somehow, just somehow, it had started with a carton of milk. Obama was nearly at the door when it happened. A man in his late 30s, balding, wearing a jacket with a faded sports team logo, entered the store, his phone tucked between shoulder and ear. He wasn't looking at anyone. But when he brushed past Obama, he stopped, just half a step, and turned. "Wait, holy, are you?" Obama gave a polite nod. "Morning." The man lowered the phone slowly. "Wow. Okay. I voted for you. Twice." He chuckled awkwardly, looking over his shoulder like he needed witnesses. "Well, I appreciate that," Obama said. There was a pause, and then the man asked something unexpected. "Do you ever miss it?" The job? Denise looked up from her register. Leo, though too far to hear the question, could feel the shift in air. The quiet suddenly had tension. Not heavy, just deliberate. Obama stood still for a beat. Then he exhaled, not in frustration, but in thought. I missed the mornings, he said at last. The first 30 minutes. When everything's still quiet. When it's just you and the country, and the whole machine hasn't started spinning yet. The man nodded slowly. Sounds heavy. It was, Obama agreed. But it was also clear. And then, just like that, he offered a handshake. The man took it, awkward but sincere. They exchanged nothing more. The former president turned, adjusted the strap of the paper bag over his shoulder, and stepped out into the overcast morning, vanishing into the rhythm of the day like he had simply been one more piece of it. But inside the store, something lingered. Leo approached the register, placing his basket down gently. Denise scanned the bread and soup without speaking, but when she got to the notebook, she paused. This yours? She asked that he nodded. Yeah. Just, don't wrinkle it, please. She smirked. I've got hands steadier than surgeons. Then she noticed the page. Denise had seen a lot of kids try to draw dinosaurs, superheroes, wild shapes that defied understanding. But this was different. It wasn't a perfect likeness, but it had soul. And it was unmistakably him. Did he see this? She asked. Yeah, Leo said, looking down. He liked it. Well, then, she said, handing it back carefully, you just got the world's quietest art critique. Leo smiled. Outside, the clouds hadn't lifted, but the rain had held off. The pavement glistened, and the breeze carried the faint smell of fresh bread and cold wind. Obama's silhouette was already turning the corner. Back inside, Leo took the receipt, placed it between the pages like a bookmark, and left the store without another word. No headlines. No photographs. Just a kid with a notebook, a sketch no one else would ever see, and a morning where something gentle had unfolded. Something easy to miss, but it would stay with them all. By late afternoon, the store had returned to its usual rhythm. The morning shift gave way to the hum of after-school runs and quiet shoppers looking for something to fill the evening silence. Denise was off the register now, sitting at a small fold-out table in the back room, stirring sugar into her tea with slow, meditative motions. She hadn't told anyone about the visit. Not her sister, not her church friends, not even her boss, who would have probably called the local paper within minutes. Some moments, she thought, just weren't built for sharing. On the other side of town, Leo sat by a window table in a quiet cafe with a chipped white mug and his sketchbook spread open. It wasn't a place he came often, just somewhere his mother had dragged him once during a rainstorm, and where she occasionally still met with neighbors to talk about school policies, rent, or the weather. But today, Leo had come alone. His backpack sat on the seat beside him, half-zipped, and the drawing lay flat on the table, smoothed out like a map to something only he had seen. He wasn't drawing now. Just looking. Across from him, a young woman sat with headphones and a laptop, and next to the register, a man in his 60s with an overgrown beard gently stirred his espresso. Nobody noticed Leo. That was fine. He preferred it that way. The quiet let him hold on to the moment longer. Outside, the streets were still damp. A few puddles mirrored the gray sky, broken only by the occasional ripple of a car passing or a dog's paw slap against the curb. Leo watched the reflections and wondered, not for the first time, how something so small, so unscripted, could carry weight. Then the bell above the cafe door chimed. He didn't look up at first. It was just another customer, another coat and scarf, another umbrella shaken dry by the entrance. But then came the voice. Hot tea. Just black. No lemon, please. Leo's pencil slipped off the page. It wasn't the voice itself, it wasn't booming or dramatic, but it had rhythm. Familiar, measured, like a metronome used to speaking through rooms far larger than this one. Leo turned, heart already hammering before his eyes confirmed it. Obama stood at the counter, politely waiting as the barista filled a cup. He had changed jackets, this one a deep navy, but the posture was the same. Relaxed but upright, like he was built to carry weight and still move quietly through it. Leo couldn't believe it. Twice in one day, he didn't move, afraid to chase the moment away. His fingers hovered above the notebook. Obama took his tea, added a touch of honey from a small jar, and looked around the cafe. It was nearly full, except for the seat across from Leo. Their eyes met. The former president paused, then smiled. "Mind if I sit?" Leo's mouth opened, then shut. He nodded quickly, heart pounding like a bird trapped behind ribs. Obama slid into the seat, tea in hand, and gestured toward the sketchbook. "You're the artist." Leo looked down. Yeah. I didn't think you'd remember." "Hard to forget someone who sees you better than a mirror," Obama said. Leo blinked, then smiled without meaning to. "I didn't think you'd come here." "I didn't either," Obama said. "But I was walking. Thinking. Sometimes places just pull you in." They sat quietly for a moment, the buzz of the cafe settling around them like static. Then Obama asked, "You always carry that notebook?" Leo nodded. "Yeah. I don't really talk much in school. Drawing's easier." Obama stirred his tea. "You ever show anyone your work?" Leo hesitated. "Only my mom. And Denise, the cashier at the store." "Think you should show more people." "Why?" "Because you've got a voice," Obama said. "And the world needs voices that don't shout just to be heard." Leo didn't answer right away. Instead, he opened the book again, flipped to the sketch, and turned it so Obama could see. Obama studied it in silence. "You captured something," he said at last. "Not just me. You caught stillness. That's hard." Leo looked at him, unsure what to say. Then Obama leaned back, folded his hands over his tea, and said, "Can I tell you something?" Leo nodded. "There's a picture of me," Obama said. "It's in a lot of newspapers. I'm standing on a stage, waving. Everyone sees it and thinks it's power. But the truth is, I was terrified. Every time you step out in front of the world, you're not sure if they'll listen. Or laugh. Or forget you were ever there." Leo watched him carefully. "I think that's why I like this," Obama said, tapping the sketchbook. "It doesn't ask for anything. It just tells the truth." He stood then, slowly, like a man with no schedule but 1,000 places still tugging at his day. "Thanks for the seat," he said. "Thanks for the milk," Leo replied, surprising even himself. Obama laughed, quiet, genuine. He picked up his tea, nodded once, and turned to go. The bell above the cafe door chimed again. And then he was gone. Leo sat back in the chair, the sketch still open in front of him. His pencil touched the page again, not to finish the portrait, but to write something beneath it, a simple line, like a caption that he didn't buy anything big. Just time. The sky over D.C. had deepened to that dusky shade between blue and violet, where streetlights flickered awake and windows glowed like held breath. The city, though still pulsing with politics and pressure, now moved slower. Softer. Somewhere between day and night, even history loosened its tie. Leo stepped out of the cafe with his sketchbook tucked under his arm and his hood pulled over his ears. He didn't feel cold. Not really. His feet moved instinctively toward nowhere in particular, weaving through the familiar grid of sidewalks and traffic lights. People passed him without noticing, all caught in their own universes. But he moved like someone carrying something fragile, invisible to others, yet unmistakably real. The notebook now held more than drawings. It held silence that meant something. At the grocery store, Denise was finishing up her shift. The lights above the dairy section cast long reflections on the polished floor. She wiped down the counter like she did every night, slow, methodical. There were no more visitors asking about Obama. In fact, only one customer had even mentioned the morning's events. An older man with a quiet voice had leaned over and said, "I think we forget that he's still walking the same streets as us." Then he'd picked up a can of beans and left. She didn't answer at the time. But now, wiping the counter, she understood the meaning better. Some people make history once. Others do it simply by showing up again, without fanfare, without lights, just by standing where they used to stand, unannounced, unguarded. In a townhouse not far from the Capitol, Barack Obama sat in a chair by the window. The tea he'd picked up earlier had cooled, untouched. A small reading lamp cast warm light on the table beside him, where a thick stack of handwritten letters lay unopened, fan mail, advice, appeals. But he wasn't reading. Instead, he was sketching. The pencil moved hesitantly over the corner of a legal pad, trying to replicate the lines of a face, narrow, sharp-eyed, with cautious determination. It didn't look quite right, but he didn't erase anything. He smiled at the attempt. The boy had drawn him first. It felt only fair to try returning the gesture. Michelle walked past the doorway, glanced in, and said, "Is that your serious face or your lost-in-thought face?" He looked up. "Bit of both." She leaned against the frame, arms crossed. "Want to talk about it?" "Not yet," he said. "Just, letting the day breathe." She nodded, the kind of nod shared between people who've weathered years, headlines, disappointments, and still find meaning in the small, ordinary stuff. Then she disappeared into the next room, and he was alone again. Down the street, Leo arrived home. He didn't speak much at dinner, just enough to pass the salad and say he'd finished his homework. Afterward, he climbed into bed, turned off the light and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in the quiet, he reached for the notebook again that he didn't open to the sketch this time. He turned to the back page, the one he usually left blank. And with the same pencil he'd been holding since morning, he wrote 6 words in the center of the paper. He walked in like he belonged. No signature. No date. No need. Back at the grocery store, Denise stood outside, locking up. She looked up at the security camera perched above the entrance. It blinked its red light, still recording. She wondered how long it kept its footage. Then she smiled to herself. Not everything needed to be saved. Some things, the best things, they just needed to be remembered.